Tune us in, turn us up, and tear the knob off. This is History in the Highway on West Star Media. The heart of Texas. It's the story and the legend of the Alamo. We'll be right back after these messages. In the southern part of Texas, near the town of San Antone, there's a fortress all in ruins that the weeds have overgrown. You can look in vain for crosses, but you'll never see one. But sometimes between the setting and the rising of the sun, you might hear a ghostly bugle, hear the men go marching by, and you'll hear them as they answer to that roll call in the sky. It's with that verse that the poem about the Alamo, the 13 Days of Glory, begins. And it's the story of the heart of Texas, Texican independence, and how people from many different paths stood together against tyranny. It's not just the story of Texas. This is an American story, the story of the men of the Alamo. The state of Texas is steeped in the tradition, the legend, the legacy of the Alamo. Every Texan knows the story, or at least every Texan should. The 13 Days of Glory, how not one man left the Alamo. Colonel Travis, Jim Bowie, Davy Crockett. This story is as honored as Washington crossing the Delaware. To the mind of Americans, to the heart of Texans, this is the modern Thermopylae. And in fact, it was compared to that in the newspapers. You remember when Leonidas and 300 Spartans stood against the might of the Persian Empire. Leonidas actually had 7,000 troops that day, but he had some real good press. And the men of Alamo, most probably only 186 in number, stood off 6,000 Mexican soldiers for 13 days. The truth is probably more colorful than the legend. These were real men that laid down their lives in defense of liberty and stood against tyranny. So how did we get here? What had happened that created this tension between the nation of Mexico and the rebellious Texans? Well, you see, back in the 1820s, Mexico declared its independence from Spain. Spain was an empire that was on the wane, and they didn't have the power to hold on to anything. So Mexico patterned itself after the United States. The hacienda owners saw themselves as being like the founding fathers of the United States. They even named the new nation Los Estados Unidos de Mexico, the United States of Mexico. And they saw that they needed some new folks, especially in the northern part of the land, up there in their state that they called Tejas. Yeah, we call it Texas. So they invited every American who had a desire for adventure, for land, to come on over. The going rate was 640 acres for every husband, 320 acres for every wife, 160 acres per child, and 80 acres for every slave. So a family of moderate size and some means could find themselves being at the top echelon of society. You would become the landed aristocracy, and you'd have quite a say. Well, there were a lot of Southern families that took the Mexican government up on the offer, and it wasn't long before Tejas was populated by Anglos. You know, these are the folks that had come in from the United States, as opposed to the Tejanos, which were the indigenous residents of Texas. These are the Mexican citizens who'd lived there for years and years. Now, really, the indigenous people there are the Kiowa and Comanche, and they didn't like either group, not the Anglos, not the Tejanos. Didn't like the Mexicans, most of all. And the Mexican government's idea was, if we get enough Anglos in there, it creates a buffer between the angry native tribes and the regular citizens of Mexico. Well, anyway, about 1830, along comes the villain. You can look at him as that, villainous character in old vaudeville, twirling his mustache and rubbing his hands together greedily. This was Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. He had become a general of the Mexican army and considered himself el presidente for life. And Santa Anna was tired of the Angelos, tired of them making money. Now, in truth, Santa Anna himself was mostly Spanish. His family had come from Spain, so he was as white as the Angelos he was wanting to fight against. The problem was economics. Santa Anna needed money, and he saw the Angelos as the best opportunity to procure it. He started putting taxes and tariffs on everything that was going into and out of the state of Tejas, especially those things that were preferred by the Angelos. Well, and then Santa Anna also decided that all the slaves that had been brought with them, if they weren't indigenous slaves, meaning slaves that were indentured to Mexican citizens prior to independence, then they were free. To the Angelos, this was a big bait and switch. All of the sudden, they'd moved in with the expectation of land and to be equally treated. Now suddenly, their property's being taken away. They're being taxed to an egregious degree, and they get pretty mad about it. Now, Stephen F. Austin, who everybody considers the father of Texas, he's the fellow that developed the colony there. He went down to Mexico City to try to negotiate a deal with the new government under Santa Anna. He didn't have a whole lot of luck. They imprisoned him. Finally, he was able to talk his way out of prison, but by the time he got back to Texas, Katie had already tried to bar the door, but the fighting had fell out right into the street. See, there was this one fella that had been sent down to Tejas from the United States government. His name was Sam Houston. Houston had also been living with the Cherokee Nation so long that they'd made him part of their tribe and sent him to Texas to negotiate for them. And when Sam Houston had come to Texas, everybody fell in love with him so much that they made him the commander of their army. And Houston had already fought battles at Gonzales and at Bihar. The siege of Bihar, or the fall of San Antonio, depends on which side you see it from, it was the beginning of Texican independence. Talking about decayed and rotten to the core, decrepit, all that, like Santa Anna, our teeth can suffer those problems if we don't take care of them. Just like the Texicans had to take care of Santa Anna, we got to take care of our teeth. And the Quip electric toothbrush is the answer. This toothbrush is approved by the American Dental Association, and it's received thousands of 5-star reviews. The Quip electric toothbrush uses ultrasonic vibrations to gently clean your teeth and gums. You don't have to beat your mouth up to enjoy fresh, clean breath or have a bright, shiny smile. What a great way to greet the day. Hey, that's why I love Quip. It makes it easy. So go to getquip.com/HTH right now, and you can get your first set of replacement bristles for free. That's getquip.com/HTH. Get you some Quip, man, and get it now. Santa Anna is smoking hot with everything that's gone on up in Tejas. He's marching at the head of an army of better than 6,000 soldiers. The Texicans, for their part, have assembled at Washington on the Brazos and have declared themselves independent from the nation of Mexico. Now, Sam Houston knew that all this stuff was going on. He's the commander of the Texican army now. And he took one of his most trusted assistants, Colonel William Travis, and ordered him to fortify San Antonio. The only thing in San Antonio that even looked like a fortification was the old mission church called Alamo. San Antonio sat right on the Camino Real, the Royal Road. Strategically, it's the only way to move across Texas. Santa Anna was headed north. Colonel Travis was going to stop him. Now, joining Travis at the Alamo were a number of Angelos and a number of Tejanos led by Juan Seguin. And Seguin would turn out to be one of the heroes of this whole war. But the Angelos and Tejanos together were Texicans. They held each other as brothers in arms. And at the Alamo, side by side, they would fight and stand against the tyranny of Santa Anna. Now, joining Travis at the Alamo as well was David Crockett. Yes, that Davy Crockett, he of the coonskin cap and the long rifle. Crockett had been elected to the legislature from Tennessee and found the legislature to be somewhat wanting. The people of Tennessee were going to vote him out, and Crockett had said to his constituency, "If you unelect me, y'all can go to hell, and I'm going to Texas." Well, the people of Tennessee unelected him, and sure enough, Davy Crockett and many of the boys from Tennessee showed up at the Alamo to stand with Travis against tyranny. Colonel Travis is leading a force of about 200. They have fortified the Alamo, and on February the 23rd, General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna and his over 6,000 soldiers arrive at San Antonio and begin the siege of the Alamo. Colonel Travis, looking out at the situation, will send out a letter that he addresses to the people of Texas and all Americans in the world. It's a very moving plea for aid and help in defense of liberty. Travis writes, "My fellow citizens and compatriots, I am besieged by more than 1,000 of Mexicans under Santa Anna. I have sustained a continual bombardment and cannonade for 24 hours and have not lost a man. The enemy has demanded a surrender at discretion. Otherwise, the garrison are to be put to the sword if the fort is taken. I have answered the demand with a cannon shot, and our flag still waves proudly from the walls. I shall never surrender or retreat. Then I call on you in the name of liberty, of patriotism, and everything dear to the American character, to come to our aid with all dispatch. The enemy is receiving reinforcements daily and will no doubt increase to 3,000 or 4,000 in 4 or 5 days. If this call is neglected, I am determined to sustain myself as long as possible and die like a soldier who never forgets what is due his own honor and that of his country. Victory or death. William Barret Travis, Lieutenant Colonel commanding." Santa Anna had sent an embassy to the mission church, and they had demanded the surrender of Travis and all inside. The flag that flew over the Alamo showed the cannon that has become famous in Texas lore, and above it said, "Come and take it." And Travis' only response to the demand for surrender was the cannon shot, and the whooping and yelling of the troops that followed. Santa Anna ordered the death of every soldier inside of the garrison. For 13 days the men would hold out. For 13 long days, Travis and his 200 stood against Santa Anna and his over 6,000. On March the 5th, 1836, Santa Anna calls his commanders together and says, in the morning, "We will directly assault the Alamo." He's just going to overwhelm it with mass numbers. The cannonade has done nothing to break the spirit of the Texicans and the men standing for freedom inside. The story is told that that same evening, Colonel Travis assembled the men of Alamo and with his saber drew a line in the sand and said to the men, "The situation here is futile. If you stay, it's suicide. You will die." He invited those who wished to leave to depart at that time. Not a man moved. The next morning, March the 6th, 1836, Santa Anna gave the order, and after a bloody 90-minute battle, the Alamo fell. The defenders' bodies were piled together and, under Santa Anna's orders, put to the flame. They were burned. Not even a burial. But the men of Alamo, with those 13 days, had bought Sam Houston the time he needed to put an army together that would defeat Santa Anna at the Battle of San Jacinto. We'll be right back. This is History in the Highway on West Star Media. You gotta pay the bills. Now, the story goes that not one man crossed the line, that nobody left that night. But in truth, one guy did leave. His name was Louis Rose. They called him Moses because he was an older man. Anyway, Moses made it back to the Texican lines and related all that had happened. So Sam Houston and the troops knew what had gone down at the Alamo. They knew the sacrifice that had been made. Now, there were others, too, that had joined Houston, that had been at the Alamo for some time. The several riders that Travis had sent out begging for reinforcements. These men all corroborated the story of the heroism and the determination of the men that fought at the Alamo. But now Santa Anna continued his relentless march across Texas. Santa Anna's army committed atrocities all along the march. And when Sam Houston finally cornered Santa Anna at San Jacinto, it was time for that army and Santa Anna to pay the price. Now, in truth, Sam Houston's army was much smaller than Santa Anna's, but Santa Anna's troops were making breakfast and washing their breeches and drawers in the creek. So, just after dawn, when 2,000 screaming Texans come riding up out of the swamp, Santa Anna's army was completely surprised and overthrown in moments. The Battle of San Jacinto didn't even last 20 minutes, and it was all over. Santa Anna, who styled himself the Napoleon of the Americas, was captured while masquerading as a private, just trying to sneak by the Texicans. Santa Anna would sign the treaty that said, "Never again will Mexico bear arms against the Republic of Texas." And he also signed a treaty stating that Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna would never lead troops against the Republic of Texas again. You know, I don't know if Santa Anna thought that through or not, but I understand there were about 800 Texicans that surrounded him at this negotiation, all of them with big long Bowie knives, just waiting for Santa Anna to make a slip. Under duress? Probably. Document signed? Absolutely. Texas had won her independence. In 1836, the Republic of Texas was born. So what's the story of the leaders of the War of Texican Independence? Well, we know that William Travis, Jim Bowie, and Davy Crockett all gave their lives fighting at the Alamo. Stephen Austin, the father of Texas, would die of a broken heart. He didn't want to see his beautiful Texas torn apart by war. Sam Houston would serve as the president of the Republic of Texas, as well as three-time senator to the United States from the state of Texas, and was actually the governor of Texas in 1861 when the Texan Congress voted articles of secession. Even though Sam Houston owned slaves, he was opposed to secession. He was a Union man through and through. Juan Seguin would go on to be a senator from Texas. And what about Santa Anna? Well, Santa Anna was deposed as president for life. He went back to live in Staten Island, New York, believe it or not. And during the Mexican-American War, the American government would pay Santa Anna to go to Mexico City and negotiate a peace. Well, Santa Anna kept all the money that he was supposed to put forward to the Mexican government, and again had himself declared president for life. This fellow was like a bad penny. And what about the legend of the Alamo? The memory of the Alamo is enshrined at the Alamo Park in the middle of San Antonio. The small mission church stands proudly as a heritage point in Texan history. The men that fought there were real. They weren't just names. They weren't a story. They were flesh and blood. And they gave their lives, believing that liberty, freedom, and independence were a birthright to all people. Their story exemplifies a struggle in every life to stand up for what is right and stand against that which is wrong, to some days make the sacrifice in the hope of winning the final conflict. At the Alamo, Travis and his men died that day. Because of their sacrifice, Sam Houston won the war. And Texas earned its independence. And the memory of the men of Alamo lives in honor forever. We'll see you next time on History in the Highway. If you like what you hear and you love what you see, catch us on our YouTube channel, History in the Highway. We'll see you later on down the road.